Hey there, I want to give you some quick notes on the Renaissance, and please do me a favor and do yourselves a favor. Listen to everything I say throughout the slides and don't just click on them and copy the notes. So here we go. Let's talk about the Renaissance. Obviously, this is basically what ends the Middle Ages and kind of brings us in history into what is known as modern day history. So the Renaissance means rebirth. There was a rebirth in art and learning, basically new ideas in art, and architecture, and science, and math, and medicine, and people just came out of this thing that was called the Dark Ages and really started to get better at doing life. There were some changes in thinking, and one of those was that people began to stress the importance of themselves as the individual. Before it was all you're all part of this bigger thing called feudalism, and your job was to give land. You get land for loyalty, and you follow the rules of the church. But now they're beginning to think, no, I individually, I matter, and I can get smart, and I can learn to read and write, and you can change the world. Another thing that happens is people begin to get more interested in the world than in heaven. They become less religious and more what's called secular. Okay, and this kind of happened for many reasons, but basically the Crusades started to make people doubt, and even more so the Black Death or the plague really got people to start to doubt whether the church, was telling them the truth or had the power that it said it had. Next is this philosophy called humanism, which was based on ancient Greek and Roman philosophy. And if you remember, we said that the Muslims had saved all those ancient Greek and Roman writings. And the Europeans, after the Crusades, when they were trading with the Muslims, the European Christians got their hands on this. And this philosophy really believed that the individual in the human society was important. Once again, that it stressed the importance of individual achievement. Another thing that really helped kind of move people into new thinking was Johannes Gutenberg invents the printing press. He gets the idea from the Chinese, but he makes it to the next level. And it will spread languages, and the ability to read and write spreads the English language and the Bible throughout basically all of Europe. It really, really changes as people learn to read and write. They get smarter and get new ideas in their head. In the world of science, because of things they learned, the Crusaders brought these ideas back from the Middle East. They began to study animals, the human anatomy, medicine, stars, and planets, and they start to get a lot smarter and really realize how things really work. One of those guys that was good at science was Leonardo da Vinci. He was a scientist, an engineer, an inventor, and an artist. The sketches of his ideas are found in a few of his notebooks. And, he had some incredibly crazy ideas for back then, some 5 or 600 years ago. Even inventions like a glider, a helicopter, and even a parachute. So some things that actually influenced people later on to invent those things or to make those happen. Another thing that begins to happen in the world of art is new art techniques. So the ancient classical art typically would show art and clean things up and make everyone look, perfect and, beautiful and super muscular and didn't show the flaws. Well, the Renaissance art started to show people as they really are. And they use this thing that they invented this thing called perspective, which makes drawing look like three-dimensional, which really makes them able to show people in real life what they look like. And they began to use light and shadows to show emotion, to really show deeply what people were thinking and what's going on. And Da Vinci, of course, was really good at this. So was Michelangelo. Speaking of these Italian artists, and Italy was where the Italian Renaissance, at least for art, started. Obviously, Leonardo da Vinci was one very important one. Raphael and Michelangelo. These were three that really great artists. And of course, they look like Ninja Turtles, don't they? It's kind of interesting. They were named after that. Anyway, great Italian artist. So things are just changing and all that. The Italian art happens in two different places. One of them in Florence, and Da Vinci, he shows human emotions in his paintings. His most probably famous painting really is The Last Supper. And some of you might even have a copy of it in your house. And then, of course, another super famous painting is the Mona Lisa, which we just saw pictures of recently. It just really shows perception and the show of emotion. Michelangelo, who was born in Italy, was a painter, sculptor, and architect. In fact, he was actually more known for being a sculptor than a painter. He didn't even really like to paint, but he did use painting, right, to really show off things for the Bible. And so he believed humans were a symbol of God's beauty and perfection. His most famous work, first of all, would be the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in Rome, where he spent like 4 years painting on up on the ceiling of this like 4 or 5 story building. And then, of course, David, the sculpture of David who fought, right, the big giant Goliath in the Bible. Then when it comes to England, the Renaissance in England was not about art as much as it was about writing and theater. And so the theater was so popular and it got so big that even the poor people could go and attend, and it became just something that people just did. And this is where William Shakespeare becomes famous. And, he's probably one of the most famous writers of all time. He wrote comedies, tragedies, historical plays. Some of his famous ones that are Romeo and Juliet. You might know that story. Hamlet, to be or not to be, is that famous line from there. And then Macbeth, which has death and murder and trying to cover up a murder plot. It's pretty cool. And Shakespeare today, his plays are still very popular, still formed today. And so the Renaissance in England really impacts us today in the way we do and still portray, William Shakespeare and his plays. Wanted to show you some pictures real quick. Here's Middle Age art. You notice that it's like almost like comic strip. It's not 3-dimensional. It's all flat. The colors are dull. The expressions on their face are just almost like cartoon characters. Very lacking in details. Okay. This looks like the picture of a king being baptized, possibly. And then you compare it to Da Vinci's Mona Lisa. So let me go back, flat, dull, no expression to, Mona Lisa. Like, look at her eyes; they're staring at you. It looks like you can just reach out and touch, like her dress, and right. I mean, it's 3-dimensional. Look how far back the scenery goes in the back, and it's vivid colors. It's beautiful. And then here's a picture of the Last Supper. The top part up here, this is the actual fresco that's painted on the wall, which happens to be falling apart and chipping in that. And then down here is a computer, redo of it. But you can notice the 3-dimensional, like how the room goes back, vivid, bright colors. Pretty amazing piece of work. So here's a little bit of the Renaissance and how it changed, not just in art, but math and science, and some of the reasons it did. So hopefully you have a little better understanding, and hope that helps you with your project. All right. You all have an awesome day. See ya.